Good morning, students. The topic of today's discussion is literary forms and terms, which is given in your syllabus of BS Semester 3. In this particular unit, we are going to study the different forms of novel, as well as some of the literary terms related to the prose sections of literature. The very first literary term or literary forms we have, that is the novel. I mean, here we are going to study different forms of novel. For that, what novel is that we have to discuss. A novel is a long narrative that is normally in prose, describe fictional characters and events in sequence. You see, any novel we have, whether it is a classic novel, whether it is a popular fiction or trash reading, anything, the novel carry fictional character and events from the life. Although you see, writer always based his story on life. But here you see the characters are coming with different names, having different identity, carry different situations. So while Ian Watt, in his book The Rise of Novel, published in 1957, suggests that the novel came into being in early 18th century. So before 18th century, you see, drama was in vogue most popularly. And then poetry became popular. But then there was a decline of dramatic tradition. And taking advantage of that, there are some reasons happened we need to understand. Decline of drama came somewhere in 17th century, early part of 17th century. Especially we see after the demise of great dramatist Shakespeare, drama undergo some deformity or deformation, we can say. That was the reason why it was in 1642 drama was banned in England. It was revived later on. Writers like John Dryden, he revived satire and drama somewhere in 1670s. But then the force which was available with drama earlier during the time of Shakespeare and contemporary dramatists, it was not there. So during these past year, you see, drama has lost its, you see, charm. And then this was the time when poetry began rise, and poetry became, you see, a popular medium. But during that time, you see, by the end of 17th century and in the beginning of 18th century, you see, periodicals came into vogue. And periodicals are the forefathers of our modern day newspaper, you can say. So these periodicals carry some stories, real stories from the life. And due to portrayal of certain character into a story form for different region, they become, popular. These characters portrayed in newspaper or you see periodicals, they became popular amongst the readers. Now here you see lies the traces or you see clue for the future novel. Although short stories were quite popular during this period, and short stories are taking broader form of a novella and then turn into a big novel. The important region came in here, or you see in the 16th century, that printing press was discovered, and printing press could print multiple copies. Although earlier, anything writers were writing, its manuscript was being circulated amongst the, close-knit friends. So one or two or very few copies were, you see, copied in handwritten manuscripts. But due to printing press, multiple copies could be printed and could be circulated, could be sold also. And this was the reason why novel now became a possibility. On the other hand, you see, novel in the early phase of the, you see, its early phase were bulkier. Now, you see, English or European countries, they were the colonizers and having their colonies in different parts of the world. And then officers and sailors, they would be traveling to their colonies for their business. And they were traveling via sea for many months. And you see, during that period, if a sailor was sailed for India and he was coming India via the Cape of the Good Hope from the South Africa. So he would take 6 months to reach India by sea. So you can see that a sailor was, you see, traveling in a sea for that much of period. It was, you say, a kind of a boredom of journey. And because of that, these sailors would carry with them books. And this was the reason why novel was a kind of a important text they would certainly carry to enjoy their time. And that was the reason why you see, instead of drama, novel was into vogue during that period. When we see the etymology or the roots of this particular word novel, so we have to go to the Spanish word for long prose and then Italian word novella. Meaning of novella is new or news or short story of something new. So you see this particular word derived from the Latin novella. Here, novel is a long fictional narrative which describes intimate human experiences. You see, a drama is also a narrative. Sometimes a long narrative poetry, like Fairy Queen, or you see, epics are there. In case of, you see, the close ancestors of the novel, you can treat or we can take epics as the ancestor of the novel, because the epic is a long narrative story in a poetic form. So here you see an epic provides you the complete package of a novel. Like you see Ramayana or Mahabharata, these are the great epics of India. Or Ulysses, Odyssey by Homer, these are the great epics of the world. And now these are the classics and have potential to be, you see, described as novels. You can transliterate them and you will be having a great novel. So in this way, in case of setting, in case of plot, in case of characterization, we can see epics are, you see, the predecessor to the modern day prose novels. So you see, novel is also a kind of a narrative. Okay, and here you see this narrative is based on intimate human experiences. The novel in the modern era usually makes use of literary prose style, and the development of prose novel at the time was encouraged by innovation in printing and the introduction of cheaper paper in the 15th century. Now, when we turn to the another, you say, form, novella, a shorter form of a novel. Okay, now this is what the genre, or sorry, this is what the form where from novel evolved. So, a novella is a written fictional prose narrative, normally longer than a short story, but a shorter than a novel. So, you see, novella is in between novel and the short story. In short story, you see, there is a single plot. It's not a complicated one, fewer characters. So in case of novella, it will be having some more characters and fewer, conflicts. So the word novella derives from the Italian novella, and the feminine of that word is novello, which means new. So novella means new. The novella is a common literary genre in several European languages. As I have mentioned, novella carry fewer conflicts than novel, yet more complicated one than a short story. Short story will have a single conflict or a single problem. Unlike novels, novella are usually not divided into chapters, are often intended to be read at a single sitting. As a short story, although white space is often used to divide the sections. So you see, novella will run into, few pages, from 50 to 100 pages, somewhere that. Like Old Man and the Sea is a great novella, you can see. So here we have to understand what Warren Carew says. The novella is generally not as formally experimental as the long story, and the novel can be, and it usually lacks the subplots, the multiple points of view, and the generic adaptability that are common in the novel. You see, when you are reading a novel, you are coming across many plots. There are similar short stories are there, parallel stories are there, and then there are multiple aspects of life, multiple aspects of problem related to the life are given. Different characters are there, and every character has their own part in the novel, as well as they carry their own story, which is related to the other characters in the novel. So in this way, many subject matters are coming together in broader novel. But in case of novella, it doesn't bring many aspects, many different, you say, subject matters. So it will be having a fewer subject matters with a limited, you say, group of characters. Now, now we are going into the different forms of novel now. Okay, popular forms of novel. So here the first one is the picaresque novel. Okay, now Picaro is a word means rug or rascal, a bad man you can say. Now this is a popular subgenre of prose fiction which might sometimes be satirical and depicts in realistic and often humorous details the adventures of a rugged hero of low social class who lives by his wits in a corrupt society. So you see, sometimes there are some clever men, but they are unable to earn money out of their own. So they are the clever men, but they want to earn money and name, become they want to become rich. And for that, they take up a wrong route, or you see, wicked route. So using their intelligence, they they use the corrupt means of ways. Like you see, there is a popular one of the story is there, like Arvind Adiga's The White Tiger. So you see here the hero of the novel is a driver, and he's from UP somewhere, and he's employed in Delhi, New Delhi, as a driver to some businessman. And then one day he killed his master, and then he migrated to Bangalore to hide his identity and save himself from the jail guard. And there himself, after some year, he is introduced to some corporate business and became a rich man. And now here he is narrating a story. In this way, a rug or a wicked man who is a murderer now became a millionaire. In this way, the story is running like that. Okay. The style of novel originated in 16th century Spain novel Lazarillo de Tormes. So this is the novel we have to understand. Lazarillo de Tormes. From here, the form the Picaro became popular and flourished throughout Europe in 17th and 18th centuries. So it reaches England in 17th and 18th century and continues to influence the modern literature. The outstanding French example is Hélène Reine Lézard's Gil Blas, published in 1715 and 35, which prepares a Spanish setting and borrows incidents from forgotten Spanish novel, but portrays a gentler, more humanized Picaro. So here you see the novel brings forth a humanized Picaro in a Spanish novel. When we see the features of the novel, a picaresque novel or narrative is usually written in a first person as an autobiographical account. So here, the central character, who is a Picaro, he narrates his own story from sometimes from his birth, or from sometimes point from where he is migrating from one place to the another. Now here, the main character is often of low character or low social class. He is or she gets by with wit and rarely designed to hold a job. So he is unable to stick to a lowly job because he is eyeing for becoming a rich in a very short span of time. And this was the reason you see he is shifting from one job to the another job, jumping from one job to the another job. In this novel, there is no plot. Okay. Now, sequence are given according to, you see, the narrator. Now, he is speaking incidences from his life to give effect to his story. So, you see, the stories are loosely connected in adventures or episodes. So, different episodes are there which are adventurous, explaining his, mission to become, you see, a millionaire. Now here, the Picaro story is told with a plainness of language or really. So here Picaro portrays by the novelist, okay, is with a plain language. No colloquial language has been used. And then satire might be a prominent element. Now here, the writer is satirizing the contemporary time and contemporary characters or contemporary society, which generates such Picaro. The behavior of a picaresque hero or heroine stops short of criminality. So you see, the crime is the subject matter because this hero or picaresque hero attempt crime or he, charged with some serious or heinous crime, sometimes a murder. And then he is a kind of a carefree, immoral rascality position, the picaresque hero as a sympathetic outsider, untouched by the false rules of society. So here this Picaro is untouched of the social norm. He is not civilized and he doesn't want to follow that. So he is an immoral character and he lives of his own in a free way. The first picaresque novel in England was Thomas Nash's Unfortunate Traveller, or The Life of Jackie Bilton, published in 1594. I mean, it was in it was in the late 16th century. And in England, the female Picaro was revived in Daniel Defoe's Moll Flanderers. It came in the year 1722. It is a very popular novel. So in case of Moll Flanderers, the heroine was born in a Newgate. And during her life of continued variety for threescore years, now you see, beside her childhood, she was 12 years a whore. Whore means she was in prostitution for 12 long years. And she married to 5 men in her life, and one of the husbands was her own brother. And then she was 12-year thief, robber. And after that, 8 years a transported felon in Virginia. And then at last she grew rich, okay, and lived honest. And remaining part of the life, she lived as an honest life, respected life. People would respect her because men and society would never know her past. And this was the reason why, because of she became a rich, she earned the respect in the society and died penitent. Okay, when she died, she had nothing. So you see, written from her own memorandums. So here, the story is came from the memorandum written by the writer herself. The next form of the novel is epistolatory novel. Now, epistolatory means when a novel is taken from the letters, or you say sequence of letter arranged in a book. So a novel written in the forms of a series of letters exchange among the characters of the story. So you see, sometimes the characters, they exchange the stories, and through that letters a novel is formed with extracts from their journal sometimes included. Okay. The word epistolatory is derived from Latin, from the Greek word epistle, meaning a letter. So epistle is a Greek word meaning a letter, and when many letters come together, give shape to a story. The first novel to expose the complex play that the genre allows was Aphra Brain's love letters between a nobleman and his sister, which appeared in 3 volumes in 1684, 1685, and 1687. So this is the first example when letters took shape into a novel published in three different volumes. The form became popular with Samuel Richardson's Pamela, Virtue Rewarded. The novel was published in 1740. In case of Richardson, which was one of the early novelists of England, and the story of a servant girl's victorious struggle against her master's attempts to seduce her. The Pamela is the story based upon the servant girl's, victorious struggle against her own master who tries to seduce her. It was one of the earliest forms of novel to be developed and remained one of the most popular up to the 19th century. The epistolary form can add greater realism to a story because it mimics the working of real life. Because it is written form, letters, and narrates the situation. So sometimes we write letters to someone and we express or we write our experiences to it. So we want to communicate our experiences to someone. Now we see sometimes many great leaders who wrote their letters to their close-knit friends. Okay, from that letters or from those letters, we learn contemporary situation. So letters are helping, you say, hand to us for understanding the situations. So this is the clue we have to take to understand epistolary novels because these letters are, taking a shape into a novel in a series. We need to take example like Samuel Richardson's Clarissa, John Cleland's early erotic novel like Fanny Hill, published in 1748, Henry Fielding's Shamela, Oliver Goldsmith's used the form to satirical effect in the Citizen of World. So these are the popular works of the time. Then Fyodor Dostoevsky used this epistolary for his first novel, Poor Foe, published in 1846. Now, the next important form is Gothic novel. It's a very popular novel. Gothic is related to some supernatural experiences to the human being. Sometimes we are surrounded with the stories of ghosts, evil, demon. So Gothic stories come with some horrible and terrible experiences related to the supernatural world. So here, Gothic novel, European romantic pseudo-medieval fiction having a prevailing atmosphere of a mystery and terror. Its heyday was the 1790s, but it underwent frequent revivals in subsequent centuries. So it was, you see, introduced in the 18th century and remained popular during 19th century. Now, it was called Gothic because its imaginative impulse was drawn from medieval buildings and ruins. Such novels commonly use such settings as castles or monasteries equipped with subterranean passages, dark battlements, hidden panels, and trapdoors. So you see why it is called as a Gothic? Because it takes the clue or a setting of time from the medieval period. And during medieval period, you see some dukedom or some royal family, have some bloody history. For becoming the head of the family, there are murderous attempts or murderous plots are being done. And in this way, a particular place became haunted. Okay, and then because of the continuous murders and adverse situation, the inhabitant of that castle left the building. And then after many years, that building which was abandoned now became ruin. And then bats and different creatures, take shelter in that building. And then some stories are revolving around that building related to the evils or related to the spirits of the previous, victims of the crime. So in this way, such haunted stories are formed, and they are remain popular. So from rumors or from different mythological stories or relational stories to certain buildings, okay, became the basis for this novel. Sometimes some temples are there, okay, have some ill stories, some wicked stories where some murders and you say some mysterious deaths occur. So such buildings became haunted place, and they are rumored amongst the common folk. The work was initiated in England by Horace Walpole's immensely successful novel Castle of Otranto. So this particular novel, Castle of Otranto, was published in 1765. Now his most respectable follower was Anne Radcliffe, whose Mysteries of Udolpho, published in 1794, and Italian 1797, are among the best examples of this genre. A more sensational type of Gothic romance exploiting horror and violence flourished in Germany and was introduced to England by Matthew Gregory Lewis with The Monk. The Monk is a very popular Gothic novel published in 1796. And then there are some other novels are there like William Beckford's Oriental Romance published in 1786, and Charles Robert Maturin's Story of an Irish Faust, Melmoth the Wanderer, published in 1820. The classic horror stories like Frankenstein, published in 1818, written by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, and Dracula by Bram Stoker, published in 1897. So these are the popular Gothic novels. Even some novels have some Gothic elements, like Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. So even in this novel also we see towards the end of the novel, she brings the rumors of the ghost and the spirits of, you say, the inhabitant of the building. So in this way, some element of Gothic, they are also being adopted in some regular forms of novel. Sometimes Gothic novel, a complete form is adopted for novel, and sometimes Gothic elements are adopted in some novels. So Wuthering Heights is the example where some element of Gothic has been adopted by the writer. Next novel is the sentimental novel. The sentimental novel, or the novel of sensibility, which was popular in 18th century. Now here you see, novel form celebrates the emotional and intellectual concepts of sentiment, sentimentalism and sensibility. So obviously, sentiment is the subject matter or at the center of this novel form. Now, sentimental novels relied on emotional response, both from their readers and characters. So here, sentiments are the subject matter for the novel. At the same time, you see, it relates the sentiments from the readers. The feature scenes of distress and tenderness, and the plot is arranged to advance emotion rather than action. So here, action is not the foremost, you say, objective before novelist, but to provoke the emotion. The result is a valorization of the fine feeling, displaying the characters as a model for refined, sensitive, emotional effect. So here you see, here writer is provoking the feeling among the reader. The very popular, you see, sentimental novels are the Samuel Richardson Pamela, The Virtue Rewarded, which was published in the year 1740. And then Oliver Goldsmith, Vicar of Wakefield, published in 1766. And Lawrence Stern's Tristram Shandy, published in 1759 and 67 in series. So here, what actually is sentimental novel? Sentimental novels gave rise to the subgenre of domestic fiction in the early 19th century, commonly called as conduct novels. The story's hero in domestic fiction is generally set in a domestic world and centers on a woman going through various types of hardships, who is juxtaposed with either a foolish or passive or a woefully undereducated woman. The contrast between the heroic women section and her foil is meant to draw sympathy to the character's plight and to instruct them about expected conduct of women. The domestic novel uses sentimentalism as a tool to convince readers of the importance of its message. The next form of novel is historical novel. Now, obviously, historical novel is related to the history, but it's not the real history. The historical novel takes the time and the situation, but again, it is a fiction carrying fictional character. So, historical novel, a novel that has its setting a period of history and that attempts to convey the spirit, manners, and social conditions of a past age with a realistic detail and fidelity, which is in some cases only apparent. So you see, uh, this novel would take its setting in a particular past period, and obviously the custom of time, culture of time, but the characters and the story will be fictional. The historic novel is definitely not a history, obviously. It is primarily a work of art in which historical materials or matters are used sometimes as a background. The pioneers of these genres were Walter Scott and James Fenimore Cooper. We have to remember these names. Here, Walter Scott's historical novel, starting with Waverley, published in 1814. Outstanding 19th century examples include Victor Hugo's Notre Dame de Paris, published in 1831, and Dumas Pierre's Lestroy's Musketeers, 1844, and Flaubert's Salamabo, published in 1862, and Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, published in 1863 and 9 in the series. So here you see historical fiction sometimes encouraged movement of romantic nationalism. Walter Scott's Waverley novel created interest in Scottish history. So here you see sometimes writer do dwell upon the historical aspect of a particular country to invoke nationalism. You see, the War and Peace of Tolstoy is taken as on the such aspect of nationalism. Many early historical novels played an important role in the rise of European popular interest in the history of the Middle Ages. Victor Hugo's The Hunchback of Notre Dame often receives credit for fueling the movement to preserve the Gothic architecture of France. The next novel is domestic novel. Domestic novel itself indicates is, you say, meaning based on the family, based on related to the life. Domestic fiction is a term used to describe a body of popular narrative literature written by, for, and about women that flourished during the mid 19th century. So obviously, domestic novel is related to the women, by the women and for the women, like that. The genre began with the Catherine Sedgwick's New England Tale, published in the year 1822, and remained a dominant fictional type until after 1870. It derived its past from the 18th century sentimental novel or a novel of sensibility. Henry Mackenzie, The Man of Feeling, published in 1771, and Oliver Goldsmith, The Vicar of Wakefield, published in 1766, and one of the earliest American novels, The Power of Sympathy, published in 1789, written by William Hill Brown. So these are the popular example of domestic novels where the women is at the center. Now, in case of plot, the plot of domestic novel, now we are undergoing some characters of this form. So the first character is plot focuses on the heroine who embodies one of the two types of examples, like the angel and the practical woman. The heroine struggle for self-mastery, learning the pain of conquering her own passions. The heroine learned to balance society's demand for self-denial and her own desire for autonomy. You see, women is subjugated in the patriarchal society. So here women is trying to come out of this frame and to establish herself and to forge her identity in the patriarchal society. So here, this woman suffers at the hands of abuser of power before establishing a network of surrogate king. And then the plot repeatedly identify immersion in filling as one of the great temptations and dangers for a developing woman. And then next character is the tale generally end with a marriage. So here in domestic novel, woman who is passing through a series of struggles come to the end part of her life. Here she marries. The novel may use a language of tears that evokes sympathy from the readers. So obviously, the situation portrayed in such a way that you see readers burst into tears, become sympathetic to the women when he see the hardship and struggles of the women were depicted in the novel. Now, the next form of the novel is Regency novel. It's a novel based on a particular period of time. So, Regency period in the United Kingdom is the period between 1811 and 1820. So, for 10 years' time, some literature was generated and that was devoted to a king. So, here you see King George III was deemed unfit to rule, and his son, later George IV, was instated to be his proxy as a Prince Regent. So here George IV, he posed himself as a Prince Regent, and it was a decade of a particular manners and fashions that overlapped with the Napoleonic period in Europe. So you see, these 10 years are a very different year when you see Prince Regent, who was, enjoy his luxuries. So the mannerism and the culture of the time affected of these 10 years depicted in the Regency novel. So here, Regency novels has two important types. Number one, classic Regency fiction or fiction actually written during the Regency era. The work of Jane Austen, Sir Walter Scott, Susan Ferrer, and Maria Edgeworth would fall into this character. So here you see Jane Austen's novel, Sense and Sensibility, okay, Pride and Prejudice. These are the popular classic of the time, but they fall into Regency fiction. The modern Regency fiction or later fiction set within the Regency era, and these includes romantic novel or romance novel, historical fiction, detective fiction, and military fiction. Prince Regent, here you see, now when you go back to the Regency, okay, or the themes of Regency, we have to go back to the Prince Regent, who spent lavishly on arts from architecture to music and lived an extremely comfortable and privileged life while he died little to help run to the country. While the outward appearance of the Regency was manners and decorum, extramarital affairs and scandals were often gossiped about by members of the ton. Ton is a term related to the upper class society. So here you see the upper class society, which gives rise to some, illicit marital affairs, or some, gossips are run around related to immorality amongst the, men of the society. So during this particular era, which is known for romantic fiction, including the works of P.B. Shelley, Walter Scott, Susan Ferrier, Maria Edgeworth, and E.T.A. Hoffman and Jane Austen. So these are the romantic writers who fall, whose work fall into this particular period. Many of the classic Regency writers are associated with the romanticism. I have just made my comment. A marriage based on love was rarely an option for most women in the British Regency, as securing a steady and sufficient income was the first consideration for both the women and the family. So you see, where we see the love and romance is a very important for married life. But here you see the women of the time, they were eyeing for the rich heritage from her bride or from her husband. So obviously, the motive of the women to settle down with a good income, and this was the reason why the love and romance in life is sidelined. So here you see example of the Regency novel is Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, published in 1811, Pride and Prejudice 1813, Macclesfield Park 1814, and Emma. Now, last form here we have to discuss, and that is black comedy. Now, black comedy or black humor. Now, black humor is a literary device used in novel and placed to discuss taboo subjects while adding an element of comedy. Sometimes you see taboo subjects are not discussed, but here in black comedy, taboo subjects have been discussed in a satiric way for comedy. So it is a style of comedy that makes light of subject matters that are normally considered serious or painful to discuss. The term black comedy can also refer to a genre in which dark humor is a core component. Popular themes of the genre include death, crime, poverty, suicide, war, violence, discrimination, disease, racism, sexism, and human sexuality. So these are the taboo subjects are often taken as a subject matter for black comedy. In literature, this term is often associated with tragedies and in sometimes equated with a tragic past. In this sense, it makes the serious incident or event a bit lighter in intensity. Although it is often inserted to induce laughter, it plays a significant role in advancing the action of the play or novel. Black humor is a type of hiatus or a pause for the audience after a heavy dose of tragic or serious incidents and similar to comic relief. It has also gives them a chance to experience laughter and discomfort at the same time. We need to go back to the Elizabethan period where tragedy or tragic drama are being presented. So in between, there is a short interval, and during that interval, a small play or small farce was, staged to make the audience laugh. Because after that small part, there is some serious tragedy was being presented on the stage, and this was the reason why uh, given importance to make the audience light was taken into consideration from this small tragic farce. Now, for example, it could be the discussion about the death, as in Catch 22. Now, this is the example of the novel Catch 22, or silliness of the very serious situation in which the fate of people in someone's hand, but it is made a common absurd situation such as in Waiting for Godot. So, Waiting for Godot is again a black comedy or a humor where three men they are waiting for someone. Now, Godot they are waiting. Now, Godot is not existent, but they know him. Okay, but the Godot never appears. Okay, so in this way, we have completed all the important forms of novel which are popular and related to this particular section of syllabus. I hope you have understood these forms of novel, and if you have any question, query, you can ask or you can send your query on WhatsApp. I can answer them. And in the next lecture, we will discuss the literary term given in this particular unit. For now, I am closing the lecture.